So I watched the Adam-friended Darth Dawkins debate. I watched what I could. It's getting close to Thanksgiving. I kind of gave up in frustration, to be perfectly honest with you. But it's also getting close to Thanksgiving, so I watched like the first half hour, 45 minutes of it, and then I gave up. But there's an interesting things that we can talk about in just that first half hour, because the presuppositionalist argument, okay, you might not know this if you're an atheist because you're used to the presuppositionalists throwing it, how they go about trying to it's a much better argument than you might realize. It's a lot more interesting philosophically than you might be aware of. Now, I don't even know, in the part of the debate that I watched, I'm not even sure that Adam friended, and this is part of the frustration with watching Darth, because I sincerely doubt that Adam friended could even give you a full explanation of what the actual presuppositionalist argument is, even though he was ostensibly participating in somebody who was trying to convince him of the correctness of the position. Now, that is not a good look for Darth, and that happens often in these debates. His version of it, and to be fair to Adam, was far more patient with him than most atheists usually are. If you go look at when Darth is on the Atheist Experience, he calls in a lot of these shows, and they hang up on him in frustration. They get really mad at him. And I understand kind of why they get mad at him. If you watch Adam, it was a little exasperating, because Adam's pretty open-minded. He even said at one part in the debate, "Let me steel yet man your position." And I sincerely doubt that Adam, after even having debated him on a subject where he's ostensibly trying to convince Adam of the correctness of his position, that Adam could even give you a full summary of his position, because he never really spelled it out, plain English, black and white. This is what presuppositionalist actually means. He has this sort of debate technique, which is deeply exasperating for the atheist participating in it, but even for the Christian watching it, because he has this debate technique wherein he gives you dribs and drabs of it, and then for the next 45 minutes, he tries to browbeat you into submission, get you, the atheist, to admit that your worldview falls apart without God. Yes, admit it. He just tries to browbeat you into submission. Now, some of the things that Adam pointed out, he's not sure, here is the underlying presuppositionalist argument. There are different variations of it, but here's the gist of it. And here's also the flaw in it. The flaw in it exists right from the title. Presupposition. It's a presupposition. In other words, if I use as my starting point that God exists, now I can account for all sorts of varied phenomena, philosophical and otherwise, in the world at large, including the laws of logic, mathematical truths, moral truths, all sorts of different phenomena I can now account for, and they perfectly cohere with my worldview. But the problem is, if I start with a presupposition, that's the problem. In other words, if I assert God exists, now I can account for all these different phenomena. It is actually somewhat correct, but it isn't a proof of anything. Why? Because you are presupposing God exists. The flaw in the argument is built right there, right from the title. Yeah, if you presuppose that God exists, it doesn't necessarily prove that God exists. But, having said that, it is more philosophically interesting than it gets credit for. If you just examine it as a structural argument, like I just laid it out, there are versions of it floating around. There are people who use it. Cy Ten Bruggencate used a version of it. Matt Slick used a version of it, or at least used to. I'm not sure if he's still doing it. And then the best version I've ever seen, Adam, if you're listening, you should check out Jay Dyer's debate with Matt Dillahunty. Again, not quite successful. It doesn't quite get you over the finish line in terms of proving that God exists, but his version of it is the most erudite, at least, the most philosophically high-minded. And his version is the best one that I've seen floating around. I can't honestly tell you what Darth's version is. And that's not a good thing necessarily. That's not a good look for him. Because Adam was trying to really flesh out, okay, what are you actually trying to tell me? And it was never really clearly enunciated. These are the actual things that the position entails. At least as far as what I watched. It's more like, here's one point about it, and then let me browbeat you into submission. So you can't. See, one of the things that wasn't clear too, now I don't know if Darth is a hard Calvinist. My guess is that he is. Sye Ten Bruggencate is for sure a really hard Calvinist. And Sye Ten Bruggencate has at least the integrity. Atheists are really, they're totally, he drives them crazy. But at least he has the integrity, being the hard Calvinist, to fully flesh out what his worldview actually entails, is what his belief system actually entails, so that the atheist is free to recoil in horror at the things he actually believes. I can't believe you actually believe that. Yeah, it's kind of how it goes down. Because his version of it, hard Calvinism, is so extreme, and he even spelled it out. Stephanie was interviewing him on her channel. He spelled it out in plain English, which I give him props for. Because the atheist does recoil in horror at the actual belief system, but he spells it out in plain English. See, I don't even know if Adam knows that this is Calvinist. And I sincerely doubt that Adam knows what Calvinism about tulip. Tulip is what Calvin actually entails. P stands for perseverance of the saints. L stands for limited atonement. I stands for, I actually don't remember what I stands for. T is the key. T stands for total depravity. And that's the one that the hard Calvinist is the most insistent on, but they don't necessarily enunciate clearly and bring to the surface. What it actually means in some versions of it is that you, the sinner, you Adam friended, and you, the atheist listening to me, are so totally depraved without the light of Christ that you're just foaming at the mouth waiting to sin, and you could barely understand the words coming out of my mouth because you're just waiting to sin. Now, I'm being a bit hyperbolic about it, but not that much, to tell you the truth. And Sye Ten Bruggencate will spell it out in plain English what it actually entails. He's even said it on Stephanie's channel. He likened the non-believers he likened all of humanity to us being completely under the ocean, having no chance of survival on our own. And God comes down, shines his light, and handpicks these people to pull out from under the sea, and the rest of them just drown. F them. Now, the reason why most hardcore Calvinists don't spell it out like that is because the obvious question pops up that the atheists will ask, and the most obvious question is, how is that possibly fair? How is that possibly? God handpicks these people. Now, they predicate it on certain scriptures that are actually in the Bible. That actually do somewhat back the position, but only if you interpret them in the most rigid possible light. Now, I don't know for a fact that Darth is a hard Calvinist, because Darth does not fully come clean with what he more just puts out little pieces of his worldview, and then he tries to basically browbeat whoever he's in the debate with into submission, so that they have to admit that their worldview is incoherent without God. And, Adam made a good point. I don't know that there's any such thing as a coherent worldview. Is anybody out here got a coherent worldview? Any of you believe anything that absolutely coheres? Or are there inconsistencies, paradoxes, are there things that you believe that don't match other things that you believe? Is there any real such thing as a coherent worldview? That's a perfectly legitimate question as far as I'm concerned. And the arguments of the presuppositionalist, like I said, it's better than you think if you're an atheist. It's at least 70% batting around in something that could be turned in. Doesn't get you over the finish line. And it certainly doesn't get you over the finish line in terms of the way, Sye and Darth present it as basically a hammer to beat up the atheist with. But it does actually make sense. And if you can find a way, it's something that I myself, your humble apologist, am tinkering with in my little prayer closet, in my little apology closet, where I just, work on apologetics. because I think it has real potential for being actually a game-changingly powerful and important philosophical argument for the existence of God. It's 70% there. The problem with it is pretty obvious. It's presupposing God exists. Okay, that's not proving. That's presupposing. So if you take as your starting point God exists, they're right. You can now actually account for things like the laws of logic, like morals and values. Morals and values, a lot of atheists are going to debate that point. But just let's say for argument's sake that that's not debatable. And you can account for mathematical truths and a whole bunch of other things like that. Now, as I pointed out in a video that I might have already posted, I might not have posted yet, that I made for Noel Plum. If you start from the atheist point of view, if you work backwards, you can see that there's actually more philosophical, there's an actual better philosophical grounding to the presuppositionalist argument than you may think. Because if you start backwards, and you say there's no such thing as a God, there is no God in the universe, we weren't intended to be here, we're alone here in the universe, there's no God, and then start trying to account for those things, it's really hard to do. You will come up with insolubles, like mathematical truths. You're going to have to account for them. That's why backwards the argument sort of works. The argument doesn't work as a, let me throw out bits and pieces of it, then browbeat you into submission. Truthfully, Jay Dyer did a little bit of the same thing. Let me try and scam Matt Dillahunty. When the atheist is in the debate, they get the feeling that the person's just trying to pull one over on them. Because he doesn't really flesh out the position to give you an opportunity to actually, as far as the part of the debate I saw, the position itself was never fully articulated. So that Adam had a chance to steel man it, which is a really good practice, by the way, wherein you take the strongest possible representation of your opponent's position and you start from there. That's a really good habit to get into. That's what Adam tried to do in the debates. He never really gave him the opportunity to do it. So, there's a flaw in it. But it is a more philosophically interesting apologetic than most atheists give it credit for, because they've only seen how the presuppositionalists go about doing it, which is basically, let me give you a couple pieces of them and force you into accepting its truth. Force you, basically browbeat you until you accept that it's true. The most famous debate on the subject was Cy Ten Bruggencate versus Matt Dillahunty. And, that's probably what put Matt Dillahunty on the map as the leading atheist apologetics, counter-apologetics guy, because he thoroughly killed him in the debate. So it's a better argument than you think. It is. I know it doesn't seem like it because they use it inappropriately, but the grounding for it, if you take it backwards and you start from the proposition God does not exist, then try to logically account for some of the actual phenomena of the real world, philosophical, scientific, or otherwise, and it becomes really hard to do. You bump up against insolubles. Insolubles. If God doesn't exist, how do I account for the laws of logic? Now, I'm not, don't get me wrong, atheists, take it chill. I'm not saying that what I just said is a groundbreakingly, convincingly argument either. I'm saying I'm just throwing it out there as food for thought. Try working on it backwards and see what you come up against. Because that's where it reveals itself as potentially a truly powerful, truly case-closed, game-changing argument, but not in the version that's being thrown around on YouTube. The version thrown around on YouTube is, it's silliness. It's basically, let me try to strong-arm you into admitting that you need God. Admit it. You need God, or you can't even you're going to sin so much without him. So there you go. Adam did about as well as could be expected under the circumstances. He was more patient with it than most atheists. I sincerely doubt he could give you a real summation of what the argument is. And that is not to the credit of the person. If you're in a debate with somebody and they walk out of the debate and they can't really summarize your position, that's on you. They should be able to. If they can summarize it and then disagree with it, fine. But they should be able to at least summarize your position clearly. If they can't, that's on you. That means you didn't really do a good job explaining it. And as from the parts of the debate that I saw, he didn't do a good job explaining it at all. I sincerely doubt Adam even knows what his main argument is. I certainly don't. And I've watched a few different versions of him, and I can't really summarize his version of it. So there you have it, kids. Just a little quick video, not a big deal. You know, just a first look at that debate. Like I said, I didn't even finish it, so maybe I'll watch it again and give a better accounting of it, but I don't know. We'll see what the response to this video is. Maybe not. That is all for now, kids. Mass is ended. Go in peace. Amen.